But welcome, and thank you for coming out. I hope you appreciate the 67-degree weather we brought in today, instead of the ice storm earlier in the week and the sub-zero chill factor before that. And so with that, let's enjoy. And I'm going to start off with showing you where you are. Okay? For those who are familiar, the patrons are all familiar where you are. For those from out of town, you're looking here. You're looking here at the complex. That building in the center is the Perlman Outpatient Clinic. You're parked underneath that, or somehow you got here. On the right, that big, tall, weird-shaped building, you're right at the base of that building right now. In other words, this is the Silo Research Center building, translational research. I never knew what translational meant. The research they do here is translated into patient practice on the floors below where the research is being done, and in between are the animals. Yeah. So that's what translational center is all about. We'll see more of that later. Meanwhile, here's the plan for the evening. All right, we're going to do this welcome. We will welcome us in a second, the invocation by Dan. And we're going to have dinner. The theme is transplants, past, present, and future. In the past, we're going to go back and look at some of the founding memories of TRIO back in the 1987 time frame. And I've actually got one of the founding families here. Also, Mark Oz here. We're going to learn more about him later. And Mary Reams, who was supposed to be here, she came out with the flu. This is a terrible flu season. I didn't realize how bad, so I have people dropping out left and right from our evenings. So if there's any space your table, that's what's going on. Mary ended up in the hospital with her flu on Monday, and she got out yesterday. So we're going to try and have her share some stories by cell phone held next to a mic. We'll see how that works, okay? And then we have the presentation of awards, and then finally we'll talk about the future. And Steve's going to give us a tour of his project, which is the new hospital. And when we get all through with that, we're going to leave here, then it's going to be over, and walk out to the bridge to the hospital where you'll be able to look out and see the stage of construction, where he just showed you the finished parts are. That's the future part. 2020, I think, is the target. It'll be more specific than I am in terms of making it operational. Fantastic story. So that's the past, present, and future. And the present part, now those award people are each being given 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Hour, we gave them half an hour. It took them an hour and a half today. So since it's 5 minutes, maybe half an hour. But the time passes quickly when you share. Anyway, they each got 5 minutes to, one, say thank you, and two, share something with the transplant community. Because we're recording this. It'll be part of the TRIO Transplant Presentation Library. And so each of these award people are going to have an opportunity to share something that'll go out to the community from their perspective and whatever they do. Having said that, I will now.
Hello and welcome to the TRIO 30th Anniversary Award Banquet. I am excited and honored to be here with you this evening. My name is Kim Nickel, and I'm the Administrative Director of the Penn Transplant Institute as of this past November. I'm excited to be a part of the Penn Medicine and Penn Transplant Institute family. The Penn Transplant Institute is over 50 years old, and we've done over 10,000 transplants: kidney, pancreas, heart, lung, and liver. And in recent years, we've expanded to include what they call VCA, vascular composite allograft transplants, those arm transplants, of which our team has performed 3, 2 in adults and 1 in a child. And then last month, as far as the future goes, we've announced our new clinical trial for uterine transplantation. We'll be one of 3 in the country offering this treatment for women who struggle with infertility. So on behalf of Penn Medicine and the Penn Transplant Institute, I welcome you this evening and look forward to sharing more about the present and the future.
Thank you very much, Kim. And speaking of transplant recipients, this is Janet Dennis. And Janet, when did you get your heart transplant?
2005.
Go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. Shall we pray? I'm going to use Psalms 118:24. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We come before the Lord with gratitude and thanksgiving. We are here tonight to celebrate Trio's 30th anniversary with a awards banquet. What a blessing. Lord, we thank you for all that Trio has accomplished in 30 years. Trio is a Transplant Recipients international organization that has withstood the test of time. Lord, we thank you for the mustard seeds that was planted years ago to allow Trio to be a blessing to the transplant community. Lord, you allow Trio to exist not only in the United States, but also Australia, Japan, and Italy. Lord, we thank you for the diligent past and present leaders who helped this group to remain active and to provide much needed services to transplant candidates, recipients, their families, the families of organ and tissue donors. Lord, we know that you are the author of miracles and you are the one who allow us to enjoy the gift of life every day. Lord, we celebrate the award recipients now and thank you for the work that they continuously do. We also thank you for their families and their support system. We thank you now for the meal we about to receive for the nourish our bodies, and we thank the hands that so carefully prepared it. We also ask prayer for the team that put this all together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Just by way of background, as you see on the titles up here, Janet Dennis is not only the chaplain for the hospital here, but she's also the World Transplant Games medal-winning transplant athlete. How many medals did you win so far?
45 medals.
When I say World Transplant, I mean she's gone to the World Games.
I was in Spain this summer. 18 golds, 13 silver, 14 bronze medals.
Oh, super. Thank you very much, Janet. Originally, I was going to put up some videos we have on our Trio website. I'm not going to do that here, but basically, the conferences that Trio used to have back in 1991 and 92 have been recorded and are up on our website. So if you want to go see that, I was going to play in the background, but you're not going to pay attention to it. We got dinner. So we're going to start with dinner. Pace yourself in any way. We're not going to do it by table. Start at this end. You're going to see the colorful potatoes after the salad and the asparagus. And then we've got the salmon. We've got some type of cheese-crusted chicken. And then finally some really tasty beef. And then there's the desserts. Home-baked cupcakes on top. And then your drinks and stuff. So you got coffee, hot water. And with that, please enjoy dinner. We'll be back around 7:30. Microphone here. Okay, just any way you want. And I've got a cell phone here. We're going to try and have our other founder family on the phone with us. And this is a picture that Mark passed on to me of the two people that are featured in a book. And we'll talk about that book later. That actually came up with the idea and created what resulted in a dinner here on the 30th anniversary for Trio. And so there's Joyce Rowe Gleason. And you don't think I wasn't surprised to find out her name was Gleason? I'm Jim Gleason. And I said, wait a minute, who's she? So, Mark, you're going to have to explain that part of it. Okay, I think I got a little bit of the story. And Mary Reeves on the right, I'm saying that to Mary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Good, this is going to work. I love it, I love it. I wish you could see Mary. We got a projection screen here that is about 30 foot wide. And just a face shot of you is about 10 foot high. Okay, but it's looking great. And for a presenter, I can't get over this projection at all. This is great. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark. And, wait, no, let's try this first. I'm going to ask Mary to talk a little bit. And then we'll bring you in, because you've got the slides. And it'll complement what she has to say, right? So, Mary, I'm going to hold the mic next to the phone. And in the backdrop, we just have some old pictures that Mark's going to use in his slide presentation. But go back to the mid-80s and tell us how you got involved with Transplant and who Brian is.
I would be very happy to do that. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this 30-year celebration. Very grateful and so proud of your program. Thinking about Trio's beginning led me to remember the many people who worked so hard However, when conquered, everyone is quick to say they knew it could be done. We might agree that William Pitt, founder of the city of Pittsburgh, Jonas Salk, who discovered a vaccine for polio while at the University of Pittsburgh, and Andy Warhol, a native of Pittsburgh and a pioneer of pop art in America, filled that definition. However, I offer to you Harry Hennett, a fourth-recorded heart transplant recipient at Presbyterian University Hospital in Pittsburgh, as my first hands-on experience as a pioneer. In 1981, Brian Williams had finally reached the last stages of cardiomyopathy, a disease that had first stricken him in 1972. Doctors at Andrews Air Force Base had first mentioned transplantation, but the possibility was so science fiction-like. When Brian was first diagnosed, we had been married less than 3 years. Because of our relative youth, our understanding of what that diagnosis meant was blinded by our optimism. We were too young to deal with the consequences, and tended to approach his illness with a feeling of, how could this possibly be happening? Or how could it possibly be serious? However, 9 years later, after repeated episodes of congestive heart failure and hospital stays, our understanding of his illness was crystal clear. Brian Williams was living a life that was sure to be shortened by his disease. In 1981, transplantation was the only hope. The question was not, would he undergo this life-saving surgery, but could he undergo it? The critical question was being decided as Brian lay in a bed on the 7th floor of Preston. In 1968, Dr. Henry Watson, a renowned surgeon, had performed the first heart transplant in Pittsburgh. Surgically, it had been a success, but the problems with rejection had not been solved and the patient died. Then, in the summer of 1980, the decision was made to try this procedure again, because great strides had been made in the area of immunosuppression. 2 patients underwent heart transplant, and they both survived. By the winter of 81, another breakthrough had occurred. When Thomas Starzl came to Pittsburgh, he brought with him cyclosporin A, an experimental drug that greatly enhanced the chance of survival. Harry Hennett was the first patient to be transplanted and receive this drug. Brian Reeves, waiting for a donor heart, happened to be in the room across the hall from Harry's. When Harry arrived on the floor, the energy level of the entire staff surged. Quarantine tape surrounded his door, and all personnel gowned and masked finally entered and exited this room. They spoke in whispers about his progress when their excitement was apparent. Brian observed all this activity. I'll never forget the late-night call I received when he first saw Harry outside his room. In hushed tones, he described in detail how Harry was walking up and down the hall. He walks and he's talking, he said, as though transplant recipients should be unable to do these kinds of things. The wonder of actually seeing someone who had undergone this miracle was overwhelming. In the days to come, arrangements were made for Brian and Harry to meet. Those of you who have had this experience know when I say that this was the single most important event in helping Brian come to terms with his fears, his hopes, and his anticipation for a transplant. This meeting was the seminal event that later led to the founding of TRIO. The very good for Brian, indeed, Brian believed all recipients and their families should deserve. It turned out that Harry would help in many ways to form the foundation for the mission of TRIO. When he was finally well enough to go back to work at the steel company where he had been a crane operator, he was told that while he had passed the company's physical, technically he had no heart. It had been removed, and therefore he could not return to work. TRIO's origins came from the need to have someone with whom to talk. I'm sure that most of you have had the experience to sit in a hospital waiting room. No matter how private a person might be, at some point, almost everyone is caught up in the culture of the waiting room. Marilyn Midler, in her book, Second Joshua, The Battle for Life, which is told from the perspective of her grandson, a double lung recipient, describes the culture very well. She writes, Granny says that the hospital waiting rooms are often dreary and sad, but filled with expectation. I guess that's true. I've never had the opportunity to experience that side of the hospital stay. I'm right in the middle of the action. But I do know that Mommy and Daddy often eat and sleep in the waiting room, and that all of my relatives have spent many hours there. Granny says that waiting rooms are good for something else. Everyone in the waiting room is going through a temporary crisis, some more major than others. Everyone is powerless to control the situation, which makes waiting rooms excellent places to pray. All waiting rooms individuals are seeking comfort and assurances, not only from the Lord, but also from each other. I can remember sitting for hours listening to one family member after another discussing their loved one's need for bypass surgery or valve replacement. They were frightened and unsure, but would find solace in those around them who were worrying about the same sort of surgery. I would pray that no one asked me about my husband, because when I would say that he was in need of a heart transplant, there would be an audible sigh of relief, knowing that what they faced seemed so much less frightening than our situation. If it hadn't been for our families, especially my mother, who supported us for all the years of Brian's illness, those days would have been totally unbearable. Brian Reeves became the President's 5th heart transplant on May 18, 1981. One of 23 heart transplants done worldwide that year. His recovery was quick, his life restored, his vigor renewed, and our hope sustained. This event transformed our lives and made us even more aware of the precarious position that all human beings are in. Brian saw this need to help others in this situation. He understood the problems and had the skills to convey the support. Anyone who came in contact with Brian walked away buoyed by his enthusiasm, fortified by his positive approach, and filled with hope. Brian never grieved for what could have been, but was thankful for what was. I am reminded of Pearl Casadilla's during the excellent when a wise Native American relates that life should be fluid as if death were the end of one's arm, and that when decisions were to be made, priorities to be determined, and responses to life situations were called for, death should be consulted. Brian lived this way. He learned to live so that when he was well, he took full advantage of opportunities, and when he wasn't well, he learned to put into perspective the possibilities and outcomes that transplantation could produce. In so doing, he learned to appreciate his life to the fullest. This quality of life was what was missing in some of the recipients that we knew. Transplantation was like exchanging one disease for another. There were so many needs. The first time that we actually started to plan for what support group might look like was at a family outing in Lake Erie about 3 months after his transplant. He talked about all of the needs that transplant patients and their families exhibited. Patient support, the family reassurance, and the original goals. Now reemployment and reentry into society were also key. The initial year was starting this group later to be known as TRIO was very much a family affair. As Brian spent most of his waking hours trying to make connections, writing letters, and making phone calls, I was baking cookies to take to recipients and family members the doctor would ask us to visit. Even our daughter Susan, who was 5 at the time, became involved. One day she was drawing, and her dad asked her to draw a picture of a trio. She proudly displayed a green tree on white paper. The tree immediately became the emblem and remains so today. In May of 1982, a newsletter entitled Transplant Bulletin first appeared at Presby, the product of Brian Reeves and other early transplant recipients. It provided information about who to call if a patient had problems, what's home, how to take cyclosporin, and some of the side effects that might occur. There was a hint that in the future there might be a way for all transplants to discuss common problems. This newsletter was followed by a needs assessment grant proposal initiated by the hospital or started on the school. First meeting of what would eventually be the virtual treatment chapter in October 8, 1983. It's not outside the It's important to refer to itself as TREPS, Recipients in Pittsburgh Society, was the world trip. By December 83, the name was changed, and the first 3 articles of the Constitution were accepted. Article 2 described the twofold objective. First, to promote public awareness of the need for transplantation, and secondly, to help ease the emotional and financial burdens inherent to transplant recipients and their families. 1984 brought the first issue that engaged this group. Cyclosporin had recently been approved by the FDA and no longer was provided free. The cost of the medication was $162 a bottle, and the average transplant recipient needed at least a bottle a week. While it was no longer experimental, insurance companies would not recognize it as a valid drug. The Literary campaign was launched to ask Congress to legislate federal subsidy to help defray the cost of the drug. The Articles of Incorporation officially made TRIO a nonprofit organization, and its members were enthusiastic about raising money and stretching beyond Pittsburgh. An extensive board of directors was selected, and plans were started to really make the group international. 1985-86 were active years for the organization. Many individuals tried to expand the work. Mary Lou Michael, a Presbyterian hospital administrator who was assigned the duty of supporting the newly formed organization, worked closely with Brian to plot the legalities and red tape that seemed to stymie the growth of the organization. Frank Rowe, a heart lung transplant candidate from Philadelphia, came to Pittsburgh to wait for a donor. He and his wife Joyce became immediately involved with TRIO and were instrumental in helping to define the vision for growth. Frank was extremely articulate and was dedicated to spreading the word of the need for organ donation. TRIO had come to realize that they needed to support the waiting candidate as much as the actual recipient. Lee Goodman, author of many sleepless nights of book about transplantation, was bringing the issues of the group to the forefront. Many others worked faithfully to support the organization. Original members John Hansel, Ed Kovac, Don Benvenuto, Chuck Netzel, and Dick Hay met monthly with Brian to organize membership drives. Recipients and educated public involving legislators reform. One project, Second Chance, a national televised program about transplantation produced by KPKA in Pittsburgh, focused on many TRIO members and their stories. Brian and Brian had become spokespersons for transplantation and appeared on many local TV shows as well as Nightline, CBS Morning News, and The Donahue Show. Transplantation was no longer viewed as a bizarre experimental surgery, but as a viable alternative. Waiting lists all around the country grew, and our phone was ringing off the hook. People who had now saw transplant recipients normalized, and they wanted that too. We had never tired of talking to a transplant candidate, nor would we ever miss an opportunity to spread the word for the need for organ donation or back away from the challenge of soliciting support for transplantation issues from legislators, company heads, insurance companies, and religious leaders. It became evident that public education and discussion of transplant issues were crucial for making the possibility of organ donation more automatic. People would say that they believed organ donation was a good thing to do, but the reality was that when faced with the decision at the time of death of a loved one, most people never thought of it. A personal example of this was when Brian's brother died unexpectedly 2 years after TRIO was formed. In our panic and agreed, organ donation wasn't a thought. The minister who happened on the scene, who either knew Brian or his work, almost apologetically asked, "Would you consider organ donation?" Can you believe the look on our faces? We, who believed, lived, and preached organ donation, when faced with the situation, never thought of it. That experience cemented for us that this had to be the keystone of TRIO's education program. Other issues about organ allocation and mandating hospital staff and potential donor families to donate became the rallying point for TRIO's efforts. Senators Kennedy, Specter, and Gore were the champions of the bill that ultimately created UNOS and mandated donor requests. Brian was very much a part of getting them on board. And TRIO was instrumental in helping to bring attention to these issues. April 21st through 27th of 1985 was proclaimed as Organ Donation Awareness Week by President Ronald Reagan. People were starting to think seriously about organ donation and being responsible in times of grief. TRIO recognized organization in the transplant community, upon which recipients and candidates could rely. Yet, the problem remained. There was no operational money, and without a sponsor, it was impossible for the organization to grow. A number of grant proposals were written, and finally, in '87, Junior League in Pittsburgh decided to include TRIO as one of its benefactors. The rest, as they say, was history. You are all witness to the past 30 years of progress. Congratulations to those who realized the vision of the early transplant pioneers and who have worked so hard to bring it to fruition. How proud Brian would be to know that his idea has firmly planted and is in such full bloom. To quote Albert Einstein, 100 times every day I remind myself that my inner and outer life depends on the labors of other men, living and dead, and that I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and am still receiving. My sincere best wishes to you all to continue your quest and help with patients and families who will join the recipient ranks. In TRIO's 30 century of support. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much. If you want to stay with us, we're going to continue some of those memories, as Mark's going to share with some pictures and stories. And then if you could stay through the awards, we'll get down to a special award for you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Yes, hi everyone. How's everyone doing?
Great.
Hi Mary, and thanks for,
I think the last time I saw you were about 10.
I was 11 and I think it was almost to the day, 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
And-
It's so good to hear your voice.
Well, likewise. And I'm so glad I'm following you because I'm going to provide a little bit more of a child's perspective on those same years. But I'm also happy you went through all those great details because there's so much I had missed. There's so much I could not even recollect. There's so much I couldn't even bring to this table. So Mary, that was perfect and excellent. Thanks so much. I'm here with my sister Tina. So my name is Mark Rowe. I'm the son of Frank Rowe, who was just talked about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Frank today. So I'm here with my sister Tina, my brother Douglas. He's not able to make it due to injury at work. First of all, Jim, thanks so much for inviting us. And not only for what you do for this group, but having this connection, which we made about 3 years ago, is personal and touching. It still gives me chills to this day that we've made that connection. And so what I want to talk about here is going to work. A little bit more about the past from on top of what Mary mentioned. We're going to talk about my father. And the precursor to this is I'm able to speak about this stuff because I've taken 30 years to kind of come to grips with losing a father. I have a great support system, and now with this support system, you don't know what it means to meet Bill and Bob, I got that right, and hear the stories of gentlemen and women surviving today post-transplant after having the experience we had with Brian and Frank that 30 years ago.
Mark, handle flexibility.
Sure.
There you go. It's on.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent, okay. So Mary, I have some slides here, I'm sorry, but you'll see them when we share them with you.
Okay, great.
And up here is Mary.
Can you just say one thing?
Yes.
This is giving me chills, just remembering how this all worked. And you may mention this later, and I'm sorry to say it first, but probably the saddest thing of this whole story is the fact that Brian and Frank ended up in beds next to each other and died 1 week apart. And that to me is just the irony of the whole thing. Yeah.
And so, Mary, I was going to try very hard not to mention that. But I'm glad you did because I don't think I could have mustered it out just as well as you just did. And so let me begin here real quick with a picture I have of that tree that now I've learned little Susan drew, and it became on cards, much like we have passed around today, as I saw tonight. And this is a relic restored and preserved by my grandfather, who survived my father. And on his last years, he presented these books of articles written and documented and clippings. You're going to see some of them to me as I carried on, after his death and into my adult life. And so what you're seeing here are photographs of some things I brought to the table at Gift of Life. You can replay that presentation some time ago too. And if you take away anything from my talk or Mary's talk, I found this early on in my research this week, trying to come up with what I'm going to talk about. And after 100 or so pages, I came back to it, and I came back to it, and I came back to it, because this is the spirit that Mary just alluded to, that I do believe prompted my father to get so involved, and that is using his voice to encourage people to not doubt the ordering process, or to think about it in a different way. And what was written here is quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer article in 1986, in response to a journalist who wrote an article, unbeknownst to Trio, unbeknownst to this organization, who doubted if ever this program would ever work, if families would ever consider signing up for something on a card before they're faced with the facts. And this was my father's response to them. So you can read it, but the gist of it is you don't have to pay for it. You're paying it forward. And I think that's a special thing. Frank, my father, was diagnosed in '83 with PPH, primary pulmonary hypertension. He moved to Pittsburgh by way of the recommendation from his physicians here in Philadelphia, who then said Pittsburgh was the transplantation center of the world at that time. Right? Fortunately, his employer, Philadelphia Electric, afforded him the ability to move, relocate, and work from a distant location. Knowing he wasn't going to work because he had to wait for a transplant, he was very sick. I think at the last of his 4 years waiting, he was in a wheelchair. But the promise was that along his journey, he would document, as he did for us as children, to kind of relive it years later. That is a very special thing in my heart as a professional in a career, to have an employer back then say, we trust you, you go, it's your time, it's compassionate. And I think if anything in this world is missing, maybe some of that needs to be shared a little bit more. Employers should look out for their people. But he also then gave back, and he wrote these articles and published them into the Philadelphia Electric, what they call the Current News, which was a circulation, and you'll see some of them here today. You saw some of the pictures already. This is Frank and Brian when they were sitting around the table talking about what to do next. What my father tried to do in a series of articles was to be an advocate, to be a voice, and maybe like some of these documents I read, and Mary, you're going to be the true test of this, tell me if it's true or not. My father was more of the stubborn, go get it, I'm going to do it, get out of my way kind of guy, and Brian was much more of a diplomat, much more of a amen. And so this was Frank in his best, apparently. But, and Mary stole a little bit of my thunder here, but through it all, through those 4 years of waiting for his donor, heart and lungs, he was waiting for both. The common theme through all this write-up was his love and respect for Brian, and for Brian's true leadership in starting Trio. But I do believe it was a match made in heaven, as I can say now, that the two played very well together. They learned from each other, they fed from each other, and they grew together, is what I'm left with as an adult now reading back on these stories. Good thing I'm wearing a suit right now, because you could not imagine how much sweat is coming down my back, the chills, the feelings. And one of the articles I found here also describing what Frank was able to do, and many pictures of these cards that were part of what they distributed out to raise awareness. And I do believe there's and Mary, you mentioned that there was legislation that came through that these cards were then mandatory to ask a patient or the families, will you consider organization, were enacted during these days. So I find this to be a true testament to what they were able to do back then. I clipped this because, once again, I'm going to go back to it. As a living, breathing child of someone who went through that, is to hear that, as I said, his vocation was to work, but his avocation was to help others gain awareness. And now, 30 years looking back, the spirit here is awesome and amazing. I'm not even looking at my notes right now because the feeling is real for me, and I hope it's just as heartwarming for you. This is Mary, Frank, Brian, Joyce. Around the same time as Mary was talking, I think this is 86, 87, the Second Chance organization was happening. The other phenomenon I'm realizing about my father is his education in psychology, his connection to those that are grieving, his connection to the feelings that someone's going to go through, and his ability to connect that to not only waiting patients, but it sounds like, maybe Mary, you can confirm this, or we can talk later if you think I'm wrong, is that he was able to learn from Brian about the years after transplantation and the years of what you go through thereafter, the things that you're going to, but not for the patient, but more so for the families of those grieving, those that are support systems. And one of the big items of mine that I keep so close to my heart, and I spoke to the Gift of Life program some years ago, is the idea that family that supports these patients need help as well. And it's important, and I think, if anything this group can do, if anything more that you can do, on top of everything else you do, is to broadcast that message. We've suffered, we've learned, we've grown, we have come upon it, we've learned from it, and others are doing that just the same. I think there's some here probably today feeling the same way. I'm going to close this with a couple of just pictures of some of the articles, again, my grandfather left with me, and this was one of the programs put forth in my dad's days at Trio. And as I'm looking through this Wednesday and Thursday night, late at night, talking to Jim on the phone, it's amazing how great things have carried forward to programs like this, which were programs like that. And if I can ever connect the past to the present, I think you've captured it, Jim. Very nicely done. And then I'm going to try and get through some of these here. My father was very well spoken and very well written, and to put these in articles for me to read later. He wanted us to live our life and to know who he was and how we led it, and to leave that as a legacy for us. It's touching, to say the least. And I'll close with that. That's one of the last pictures. Mary, you can't see it, but that's a picture of me and Doug and Tina and Frank at his bedside. I do believe this is after heart transplant. I believe this is January 88.
It was actually Christmas. He had it on December 4th, December 5th, the transplant. We still lived in Philadelphia. We flew out for Christmas, so I believe this was like what we saw for Christmas before he passed away.
That's right. So it's a picture soon after Christmas of Doug, Frank, Tina, and I at his bedside. He would then pass a month or two later. And long live his legacy. Mary, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
I'm humbled to be a part of the team that brought this together, because look at the connection we just made with 30 years ago. And I know Elizabeth and Bruce were sitting back there recalling when they were in Pittsburgh and the kids were so young. How old were your kids at that time? 4 and newborn, visiting out in Pittsburgh. And here's another family, almost in the same circumstances. And an awful lot of the people in this audience, whether they're a heart surgeon like Mike Acker, Howard Nathan, organizing organ donation and education, and so many others, they can connect to what was history here. And so thank you for taking us back in the past, Mark, for sharing and bringing your father's memory forward. One of the things that I was able to do is get copies of Lee Kuchen's book that talks about both Brian and Frank and the beginnings of Trio. So each award recipient today will get a copy, autographed copy of this book. Mark brought my attention to this book back when he gave his presentation to our meeting at Gifted Life. And I went out on Amazon and ordered a used book. And that used book came in hardcover with Lee Kuchen's autograph, and it was done at some event at the Transplant house there in Pittsburgh. And so I have that book. These are pristine new books, but Lee did autograph them for us. And so Mary, stay with us if you can, and we'll see what we do for you. Howard and Pam, will you come forward? Most of you met my wife Pam earlier, and Howard, you can explain this next slide.
Hi, everybody. I know most everybody here. So yeah,
Just explain that, and then we'll do
Sure.
a presentation, and then you can talk again.
most of you probably got my press release Monday or Tuesday. We're very proud of our region. There's more families here who say yes to donation than anywhere in the United States and probably the world. So this year, we're grateful to those families that 565 organ donors and 1,546 organs were transplanted because of families in our tri-state area. So we're very proud of that. And so I broadcast because of the pride we have.
Too often we take for granted, because this is normal here, that this is normal here, when in fact this is extraordinary, because we live in Gifted Life's area, and this is what we've 10 years come to expect.
Well, I've had the privilege of knowing Howard for 20 years now. I'm one of those donor families who lost a child and had the opportunity to donate his organs. And Howard has been there for Trio since the beginning. He allowed space in his building. He brought in food sometimes, and always just openly said yes, whatever needed to be done, whatever you needed to make transplant better. That's been Howard's journey. He is the past, present, and future of transplant. He's always forward-thinking, from wanting a family house and making that happen to building his worldwide training and education center here in Philadelphia on the 4th floor where the board met today. And so it is my honor and privilege to tonight give this Lifetime Achievement Award to Howard Nathan. Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Howard M. Nathan for your contributions to the transplant community and many years of worldwide leadership. As beneficiaries of your dedication to saving lives through organ donation, thank you, Howard, for your leadership and ongoing support of Trio and transplant patients overall. And I just want to add that Howard has been instrumental in supporting all of the donor families that they recover organs from. So it's not just the recipients that get support from him, it's the donor families as well.
You want me to say something?
Yes.
You will be limited.
5 minutes.
No, it's not even 5 minutes. No, I just wanted to say how grateful I am to be here. I came to Philadelphia about 43 years ago and actually worked across the street at a place called Wistar Institute. And then I left Pittsburgh for a while to go to grad school, and I came back to Philadelphia and took this job. So that was 40 years ago. was 1978. So much of what Mary and Mark were talking about, I lived through. I remember the days of beginning TRIO and how you folks really tried so hard to make sure you helped the donation process. My colleague in Pittsburgh was a guy named Brian Brosnick, and Brian was listed on one of those programs, and he was a pioneer too. And together we passed a law in Pennsylvania that made Pennsylvania not only the leading transplant programs because of Pittsburgh and Penn and all the other programs, but it changed how donation occurs. It's a mandate that requires hospitals to cooperate and call us on every person who passes away so we can offer the opportunity to families to say yes. And that changed not only Pennsylvania, increased donation 43% in 3 years. In 1998, it became a federal law in regulation through Medicare for all hospitals in the country. So we celebrate your lives and what you've created for support of families. And for those of you who are from Philly, I appreciate all your volunteerism. You know, Pam and Jim go out and speak to hospitals all the time, medical schools, etc., and tell their story. And the other thing is the partnership we have with the transplant teams. Mike Acker, I've known for a long time. He was determined to make Penn the best in the world. And this year, for the lung transplant program, along with Temple, more lung transplants have been performed in Philadelphia than anywhere else in the world. And that's from determination and expertise and building a good team. So I'm grateful to the partners that we have on our teams. We do have many transplant teams in our region. It's fun trying to keep everybody organized and straight. But we're grateful for that partnership. It makes it all work. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard. Our next honoree, also the CEO and president of an organization that has a lot to do with transplant, obviously, Brian Shepard of UNOS. And Brian is down at the AST conference in in Miami. And when we announced this for him, he tried to find if he could get a flight back up. He was presenting this afternoon down there to get back here in time for this dinner, which I was very humbled that he was willing to do that. There was no such flight. So what we have here
First, I want to say thanks to TRIO and to Jim for this award. I've seen the list of the other honorees tonight. Congratulations to all of you. I'm just honored to be mentioned at the same time as you. Being the CEO of UNOS is a fantastic job. Every day I get to work with a team of dedicated full-time professionals and committed volunteers, people who are talented, caring, focused on helping candidates on the waiting list get the transplants that they need. And this award really is less a result of anything that I've done than it is a recognition of the work of hundreds of staff and volunteers at UNOS. On their behalf, I'm honored to accept and will share your compliments with the team back in Richmond. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person tonight. I had already committed to presenting at another conference, but Jim insisted that I give you my 5 minutes anyway, so here's my quick perspective on where I think we're going in the next few years. First, big data is only going to get bigger. Much bigger. UNOS was a pioneer in evidence-based medicine, and data has always driven our allocation algorithms and all of our policy development. We hold data about every transplant candidate, every recipient, and every living and deceased donor in the United States since 1986 in our database. And we use that data to design our new allocation rules. But as we've collected this data, we've always faced a trade-off between the usefulness of the data and the cost of the hospitals having to collect and manually enter data into our database. Technology is now eliminating that trade-off, and soon we'll have tens and hundreds of times more information available to improve the way we do matches. And there are more data that we can add to the hospital data to answer questions that we've never even asked before. With lab results and prescription information, could we predict problems before a transplant begins to fail? With data created by our own matching system, can we do essentially national process reviews of which steps work smoothly and where people get hung up? The next phase of data-driven medicine isn't another incremental improvement, it'll be a sea change. Second, it's time to connect all that data to people. So more data always sounds better until you're the person trying to read all of it and make sense of it on your smartphone in the middle of the night. So does it matter how we present an organ offer to doctors? Does it matter how doctors describe relative risks to their patients? Are the indicators that really lead to successful transplants the same ones that we currently use to make decisions? Can we predict which doctors will accept which organs and make the system move even faster? So UNOS is working with behavioral scientists who understand decision processes and hang-ups. They aren't experts in doctors or even medicine particularly. They're experts in the way that people think. And we want to make our system not only give the right answer, but give it in the right way that is most effective for the human decision makers that are using the system. So third, and this is the most important, we need to hear more from the people who have the most at stake in what we do, the patients. One of the biggest debates in transplant right now is what metrics we should be using to measure programs. How do we know who the best programs are? How do we know who needs improvements? How do we know where to target our efforts? But the voice that's missing in that discussion, or if not missing, isn't loud enough yet, is the voice of the patient. The current transplant metrics are all about post-transplant outcomes, and that's important, and everybody wants transplanted organs to work as well and for as long as possible. But what if we're deterring hospitals from using some organs that might just not last as long? What's the right balance between holding out for the best possible organ and spending more time on the waiting list? What's an acceptable level of risk for patients? And that's a question that only you can answer. That shouldn't be answered for you. We need new and better ways to get more patient voices into the conversation. We're currently considering a restructuring of our policymaking committees. We'll still have smaller technical committees to work out the details of new policy, but we're going to use new technology tools to open up the big picture directional conversations to a much, much broader audience. Now, TRIO has always been engaged, and Jim's never shy about speaking his mind in a UNOS board meeting. But it's time we had more patients at the table at every stage of policy development, and especially when we're talking about priorities and values. Transplant is an exciting field, and I feel like we're in a transitional time. We're still close enough to the invention of the field that some of the inventors are still with us. And we've moved through a phase where the miracle of transplantation has become the standard of care. And now we're on the verge of the next leap forward, using all the tools at our disposal to continuously improve the work that we do. And I feel lucky to be part of it. Thank you again for tonight's recognition and for the work that you do to make transplantation more accessible and more effective for those who need it. Thanks.
I'm going to invite the newest member of the UNOS board to come forward and accept this honor. Bob Goodman, heart transplant, when, Bob?
November 2013.
November 2013, on behalf of Brian Shepard. Be careful, it's heavy. Here's the book, the certificate, and just make sure Brian gets that.
Yeah, I'm going to give it back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Bob. The thing that I can't get over, Howard's a good example of it, Brian Shepard's another good example of it. These people are sitting up at the top of some pretty awesome organizations, and yet they're common folk, and they make us patients feel very comfortable just talking to them. They come out and do things like this for us, both today, the luncheon speech that Howard gave us at our board meeting. They just don't stop. And Brian Shepard's the same way. Serving on that board now for 6 years, it is not unusual for him to respond to my emails Sunday night at 9 o'clock. When I'm at the board meeting, if you ask for something, it's considered and say, no, that's a good idea, we should do that. And next thing you know, they're doing it. That 42-member board is a third made up of donor families and patients who are recipients. And so public comment is a place to give your voice to that, and I hope you take advantage of that when you can. Susan Pickens, would you come forward with Chris Miller?
Dr. Miller is director of Penn Dermatology and Oncology Center. So the work that Dr. Miller does is very relevant to transplant recipients. He specializes in Mohs surgery, basal cell carcinoma, and other skin cancers. So those of you who are recipients here are all familiar with the work that Chris does. Chris started working with TRIO, we were talking about 6-7 years ago. At TRIO Philadelphia, we bring in speakers from time to time to talk to our members about something that's relevant to us, particularly post-transplant. And we're sitting in a meeting and going, and Jim asked, well, does anybody know a good dermatologist that knows transplant recipients and transplant problems? And 3 of us, our hands went up in the air. And Jim said, oh, wow, who's that? And all 3 of us had the same answer, and it was Dr. Miller. And a large portion of his practice is with transplant recipients. And since the time that Dr. Miller has gotten involved with TRIO, he's worked with Jim on the post-transplant cancer project. He's always willing to give his time and his work colleagues' time. And that work that we do with post-transplant cancer information that we share with the transplant community is a large part of what TRIO does, and we really appreciate the work that Dr. Miller does in the time that he has done. Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Chris J. Miller, MD, for your support of TRIO's post-transplant cancer campaign and a career of exceptional dermatological care and transplant recipients. Thank you, Chris, on behalf of the TRIO and patients you have so passionately care in your years of transplant medical aid practice. We're presenting Chris, Dr. Miller, with the TRIO Presidential Award presented at the TRIO's 30th anniversary.
Susan, thank you for that kind introduction, and Jim, thank you for the invitation and the honor. I'm a little guy on the block here, and I'm an imposter, I feel, so I thank you for letting me join this crowd. So Dr. Acker is going to talk to you about the heart transplants that he does. I meet you guys after the crisis, and it's interesting to get the history from you, Mark, and Tina about your dad, and Mary about your husband, to recognize how much these transplants impact not just the patients but the family. And that's the privilege that we have as your dermatologists and surgeons for your cancers, because when you have skin cancers, and I'm sure you all know your friends with transplants who have many and maybe have passed away from them, you often get a lot of them. And we have the privilege of developing long-term relationships with all of you and your families. And I'm very inspired by those relationships. I'm inspired by the history here. So at Penn Dermatology Oncology Center, in our clinic for immunosuppressed and transplant patients, you'll find us continuing our research to prevent the skin cancers in the first place, to make sure you have excellent outcomes if you develop them, and most importantly, to make sure that we maintain your quality of life as best as it can be after you've had a transplant. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you. In the transplant community, Chris is a legend for several things. One, believe it or not, it's painless surgery that he does. And you sit there and look at your tendon, which is now exposed from the work he's doing. You can't imagine that this has no pain. I'm saying it's not the case when you get home a couple hours later, but. And secondly, have you ever tried to get hold of your doctor at this level sometime after? He sends his patients home with his home phone number. And when he went over to whatever European country we were training some surgeons over there, he called from there in response to something I sent him. I mean, even when he's out in the world, he keeps in touch with the patients. Chris, I can't tell you enough, thank you from all of your patients. And Susan shared what it was. You have such a following, that I had to go see who this guy was. It's been a friendship ever since. Thank you very much, Chris. Peter, would you come forward, please? I am so tickled to have Peter Manning here with us because he's the president and CEO of a company called CareDx, and they have developed several products which I hope you'll describe briefly. But for us heart recipients, as opposed to having a heart biopsy, and moving slides like that, thank you, my partner. When you have a heart biopsy, it's an interesting process, and a heart recipient goes through that maybe 30 to 40 times over the first couple of years. And they take a biotherm and they cut into your artery and go down into the heart and take pieces of the heart out. And then they examine those to see if they're undergoing rejection. Believe it or not, you're not put out for that process. They talk you through it. Take your shirt off, if your pants, shoes, and everything are left on. But it's not a fun process if you had to avoid it. Well, the work that CareDx does has replaced that with a blood draw. And I was sharing with Peter, when we meet patients today that are using that instead of the biopsy, I call them wimps. You know how you use them, an hour uphill to school and back? Well, if you can have a heart biopsy, you're a wimp these days. Blood work, come on, give me a break. Last January, I got to go to San Francisco and talk to his company and share the story of what it's like to be on the other end. I can't tell you what a reception it was. And this man couldn't have been more gracious in terms of making me feel comfortable. And he does that every month for his international company. He brings in inspirational patients so that they can see what their work is all about. And so from that perspective, hold on just 1 second.
Can I make a comment?
Not thinking, these are petty. To present you with this award, Transplant Recipients Staff Organization proudly recognizes Peter Mang, PhD, for his support of TRIO and exceptional corporate leadership and innovation in the world of transplantation. On behalf of TRIO and the many patients' lives who have been impacted through years of innovative leadership, we thank you, Peter. TRIO Transplant Innovation Award, well deserved, and I'm proud to pass that on. We're in San Francisco for our event. That's how it's committed. You support TRIO financially, support in speakers at our events. They can't do enough for us. Peter, thank you. Please, the mic is yours. You be the one.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. I'm deeply humbled, and thank you very much for UPenn hosting this event. I do feel like this is where innovation happens. And I quickly talk about the present. The presently today, CareDx cares about probably 90% of all the heart transplant programs in the country are adopting AlloMap, our technology. More than 20,000 patients, 20,000 heart transplant patients have been cared for with AlloMap. Why is that so significant? Because there are only about 3,000 heart transplants performed every year in the United States. But we do much more than that. We do much more than that, because that's the present. We actually match with our technology, HLA technology, organs to recipients. More than 20,000 patients and donors are matched with our technology every year. And so we are part of the process that we heard discussed today. But then let me also talk with you about the future. Right now, we just got Medicare reimbursement, which is very important in our technology. The permission to market a new product called AlloSure for kidney transplantation. And what does that product do? It actually determines the health of the transplanted organ. Maybe some of you have seen in the advertisements the sequencing technology that's now used in Ancestry.com, where you can determine your heritage. What we as a company do, we actually take this information not only from the recipient, but also from the donor, and determine what's the health of the transplanted organ. We because the future that we see in transplantation is long-term outcomes. What is the long-term outcome? Right now, everybody is so focused on the one-year graft survival. What really is important, how can we change the long-term outcome? So we have the matching information pre-transplant, we have the information that's currently performed, and then the long-term information through our genomic information database. We recently announced that we're starting a clinical trial in 30 centers in the United States over a 3-year period to determine long-term outcomes of kidney transplantation. Already today, we have 35 heart transplant centers in the US collecting data in our registry trial, where more than 2,000 heart transplant patients give us the permission to collect the information to learn more how can we impact long-term outcomes in the future. Now, being here at UPenn is exciting. Their transplantations happen every day. Being here in an area where there's a record collection of organs and matchings of organs is also exciting. Actually, I'm here with Gordon Hill, that is a local supporter, where we are having our presence here near Philadelphia, where we're doing the matching, providing the diagnostics for the matching. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jim. More importantly, thank you to all the patients that are providing us with the information for our AlloMap, the AlloSure, and many more products to come. Thank you.
Ron Taubman is going to introduce our next honoree, who is chapter president, and Ron is our chapter council chair. We do it right here. What it says is right there.
Well, you're very lucky you've got 2 presenters tonight, both with broken ankles. So I was given the honor of introducing Marty Byrne from the Trio organization that he and his wife, Michelle, founded with no members to become one of our largest chapters. I think you've got over 130 members now. Is that correct, or is it more?
140, I thought.
150, even more. Marty had the ability to work with his local OPO and the 2 major transplant medical centers in this area, where they created a synergy where they worked with each other, they helped each other build this local support group of Trio. He's worked wonderfully. He's a devoted man, Marty. He's done a great job of supporting the transplant recipients. Jim roped him into being the chapter's manager for a few years, which unfortunately now I am. It's a tough job, so I know what he went through. So this award tonight goes to Marty, and
Marty, would you come forward?
the award reads as Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Marty Barron for your years of transplant patient leadership and support in founding and growing Trio, Maryland. On behalf of Trio and the many patients we have so passionately impaired with, we thank you, and Marty, thank you very much, Marty. Great job.
I'm a little surprised because I'm not quite as qualified as the men before me. And Mark, thank you for sharing your story. I'm very proud to be president of Trio, Maryland. The thing that I would like to say, most importantly to start off, is none of this would be possible without my wife. Unfortunately for me, back in 2009, I had an unexpected liver transplant. I had a year off. And my wife and I spent that whole year talking to the transplant community. We talked to our OPO, the Living Legacy Foundation, University of Maryland Transplant Center, and Johns Hopkins. And at that point, we realized that the recipients and their families were the forgotten people. Once they left the transplant center, there was literally no help on a daily basis. So my wife and I decided to undertake this challenge of opening up a support group. We had no groundwork to it, which made this very possibly the most unique gift I was ever given. I was able to put this together all by myself. With my wife and I, we visited the doctors. We visited Charlie Alexander, who headed up the Living Legacy Foundation, and we decided we were going to start this chapter. Over those years, we are now presenting a monthly speaker series. We put out picnics during the summer to bring everyone together, the holiday parties in the fall to make us all joyous for the gift that we had. And on top of that, we put on 4 transplant conferences over the last 4 years. Now, that may not sound like a big job, but each one of those conferences entailed 15 different topics, 25 to 30 doctors, and we were always surprised to see more than 400 people attend each one of those events. I've been very blessed to have my wife and the doctor that I did, because I don't think any of this would be possible. And all I can tell you right now, that the last 8 years have been so rewarding to me, and they also have been the best years of my life. I want to thank everybody for this award, and if you have any questions, please see me afterwards. Thank you very much.
You made quite a team, the two of you. Our next awardee, you've heard from already, so you've heard her story. Mary, we're talking about you at this point. And Mark, would you come on up and receive the award on her behalf? And Mary, just hold on 1 second. We've got in the background here, we've got a friend who's going to talk about his book, Many Sleepless Nights, and say hello to the two of you. So 1 second, let me see if I can make this work.
Mary, Mark, I'm so happy to have this opportunity to just talk to you just for a second. I will never forget Brian. I will never forget Frank. How devoted they were to TRIO. How important they were to the entire transplant patient recipient world. And I'll never forget that whole world of transplantation that I lived with you for such a long time in the 1980s and early 1990s. I think about it all the time. I've written many books since then, but it's the book that impacted my life more than anything. And the inspiration that Frank and Brian gave me, I'll never forget. And I think about them all the time. It's really amazing. After so long, so many years passing, I think about those guys, how close they were, how much and how often they worked together to achieve an incredibly important mission that lots of other people were putting aside in the transplant world. And so, on this day, I'm sorry I can't be with you. But I am. Here I am, a little grayer, a little older, but here I am with you on this particularly important night, saying to you that I miss you, I miss Brian, I miss Frank, and you all have impacted my life more than anything else that has ever happened to me in all my years. congratulations to you on this night, and I hope that at some point very soon we can meet face to face. Thanks for letting me make this little message to you on this important day.
Thank you so much for making that possible. That was just wonderful. Thank you.
So, Mary, this is Elizabeth Rubin, and you and I have never met. I was hoping I could meet you tonight. But I want to thank you because I too was in Pittsburgh for a lengthy period of time in the same hospital where your husband was. And because of what you and he did all those years ago, I left Pittsburgh with the idea to start a chapter in Philadelphia, a chapter of TRIO. Because when I was in the hospital waiting for a liver transplant, I had several recipients come and visit me and tell me all about TRIO, and they made me go to a meeting, which at the time seemed a little premature because they were talking about plans for the next year, and all I could think about was, will I even be here next year? But I obviously was. I obviously survived, and it's now been 25 years since my liver transplant. And I am so grateful for all the work you, your husband, and your father did to make TRIO possible so that we could bring it forward to where it is today, 30 years later. Thank you. So I am presenting to you a Founders Award, and I just want to read it. Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Mary Reams for your role in founding and guiding TRIO's birthing 30 years ago. On behalf of TRIO and so many patients over the years who have benefited from your and Brian's founding efforts, we thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. You, Frank. Transplant recipients. Well, yes, of course, Mark. Because of Frank.
Feeling like Frank.
Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Frank through his, in memory and honor for his role founding, supporting, and guiding TRIO 30 years ago. On behalf of TRIO and the many patients who have been touched by Frank and his family's efforts, we thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow. I don't have much more to add except this, that Mary, it's an honor to accept this on behalf of you and Brian. It's beyond words what you mean to us and what Brian means to this community. And I guess the only words are, I feel proud for him, and I think he feels proud for us. Thank you.
Very good to get to see you again, and your sister Gina, and your brother. That would just be a wonderful thing. And for my children, come through and see you.
We agree. Thank you, Mary.
It is so cool to be president of an organization like TRIO and be able to do something so special that I can't tell you more. Mike, would you come forward, please? 24 years ago, this coming October, I met Mike Acker And all I can remember, Mike, as the surgeon who replaced my heart with a donor heart, was him coming in a day or two later. And he was very tired. I was laying in the bed. He came and sat next to me. I don't know if he says this to every patient or whether he was just in that mood that day. But he said, Mr. Gleason, I held your heart in my hand. He put his hands out like this. And he said, it was really worn out. I don't know how you got as far as you did. To think of somebody who's held your heart in his hand, I gotta tell you, it touches my heart even today. And very uniquely, we've become friends over time when I've had questions about UNO's policy relative to heart allocation. Mike has been at the regional meetings and spoke up. And so I would call to get an explanation. He said, why don't you come on into my office this afternoon, we'll sit down and talk. How many people at that level invite you to come on and have a conversation? I gotta tell you, an hour later of the details, I can't say I fully understood. But I sure did appreciate the time he took with a patient to explain that so that I could go back on the UNO's board and vote accordingly. It was very special. And then just 2 years ago, my wife and I happened to be out in Phoenix for an AST meeting of patient organizations, and I saw that Mike Acker was going to be doing one of the workshops. Of course, I had to go and sit in on that. And as I sat there, as Brian Shepard before, I can't keep my mouth shut, right? He's doing his presentation, high-tech graphs, patient survival, blah, blah, blah. I finally said, I got to say something. At the end of his presentation, with a room full of doctors of all different nature, I raised my hand. They were trying to move on so quickly, so no, I have to say something first. I said, Mike, as a patient of yours who got his heart 24 years ago at your hands, I'm here in Phoenix to say thank you. The room rose, standing ovation and cheers for Mike Acker. And so, when I had the opportunity to recognize him as a presidential award, I did. Right? And Transplant Recipients International Organization proudly recognizes Michael A. Acker, MD, for your career of life-saving heart transplant surgical skills and patient care. Thank you on behalf of TRIO, myself, and many patients you have passionately cared for in your years of heart transplant surgery. And so I am so proud, one, to be alive and share and honor you with the TRIO Lifetime Achievement Award. And sitting here at the tables, we've got several people. Mary, where are you? Mary got her heart, how many years ago, Mary?
4 years ago last week.
At his hands. And most recently, where's Chris? Chris, stand up for a minute. Heart transplant 40 days ago. They stand, they talk, they walk, and they're adored by such beautiful wives like Sandy, who's probably gone through more suffering than Chris has. What a great opportunity to come and share that with you, Mike. So, the mic is yours to share with you.
Well, Jim, and everyone in TRIO, I can't thank you enough for this honor. I had a different interpretation of the event 2 years ago in Phoenix. They were really clapping for Jim, not for me. It's been quite a journey. I mean, I spent most of my career at Penn, arriving from Johns Hopkins in 1993. I'll just give you a little bit of history in light of the theme of today. One of the first persons that reached out to me was Howard. He was, wondering how we can, Howard's always an entrepreneur in heart and wanting to, grow transplants in Penn. And though we did our first heart transplant at Penn in 1987, the program had pretty much lied dormant. When I arrived in '93, having done transplants at Hopkins during my training and as a young attending there was only one transplant that had been done in the last year or so. And we grew. There was no cardiologist when I arrived. The whole heart transplant team sort of left. And I remember around the time for the first year, you remember Evan Lowe coming, one of our first great recruits that helped grow the program. But before Evan came, I actually had to do the transplant, look at the biopsies, do the biopsies, and everything was on me. The Penn community grew, and we focused on the heart transplantation. under the great leadership of Clyde Barker, who with Howard Nathan actually, I believe, started Gift of Life. One of the reasons Philadelphia is so successful is Gift of Life. It is a unique gem. It's unique in the United States. We are so lucky in the Delaware Valley to have Gift of Life, and I pray with the new allocation system that our community will continue to be benefited from it. And my fear is that we might lose some of the specialness we have, of that ownership, that partnership that we've grown over 30, 40 years together. And did their 1,000th heart transplant a few years ago, and I think now we're up close to 1,300. We follow 800 heart transplants currently at Penn. And last year, a great year for Life and a great year for Penn transplant community. Penn was the largest thoracic transplant program in the country, combined numbers of lung and hearts, which is quite an achievement. We couldn't have done it without the team, right? Everything's about the team, it's not about people. It's about the team that Penn has put together under Dr. Barker's leadership, Dr. Najee's leadership, going forward, the nurses, the cardiologists, the social workers, everybody that makes your life so special, and what's made my career so special. And this honor, you have no idea how important it is, because it's a recognition that I did touch some lives and I did kind of make the difference. And I can't thank you enough for that honor. Jim?
And by the way, I met Mike's mother at one of our dashes that Gift of Life puts on, and I got to thank her for her son's work. Maureen, would you stand up for 1 second? We just want to recognize these are truly teams. This is the home team. That's Maureen, his wife, and Chris. You want to stand up, Eddie? Again, when these guys are doing their work at home, somebody's keeping the house together. And so we just want to recognize them also. All right, we have one last award, and it's on your program. But Elizabeth, could you come forward with Bruce? And Elizabeth has a program that does not show this step.
Come on down.
Yeah. But I just want to say one thing. I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, but he's got a message there. And that is, Elizabeth has been around. And the family has been around together. What wedding anniversary was this? 35 years. And so they recently celebrated 35th anniversary. She came back and founded Trio Philadelphia. She has bailed out the national organization both in terms of leadership. When they ran out of money, loaned them money to keep going. We wouldn't be here today. We would have declared bankruptcy back in before 2000 without her. And she has been such a supporter in the Trio at all levels, both in time, talent, and financially. And none of that happens without a husband supporting it. So, on behalf of Trio, we proudly recognize Elizabeth Rubin for decades of Trio local and national support and leadership. Thank you, Elizabeth, on behalf of Trio and the many patients you have so passionately supported for 25 years. And so I'm proud to present the Trio Lifetime Support Award to you, Elizabeth. And Bruce?
Long day, right? It's 9 o'clock and I'm between you and the hotel room. So I'll be relatively brief, but I won't be that brief. So it's hard to believe it's 25 years from when we got a phone call from a doctor in Philadelphia to our house, July 4th weekend, that my wife had to get a liver transplant. Very well known GI doctor, Craig Aaronchak. At the
time, Philadelphia was not a big liver center. His best friend doctor was at Pittsburgh, and I said, when did we have to go? He said, like tomorrow. We did our wills. We had a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old at the time. We flew to Pittsburgh, and the next thing I know, we entered a whole new world. You don't predict these things. You don't realize these things. And for the next 5 months, we went through an experience that all of you have been through in some form. And I was listening to the discussions earlier about waiting rooms. We spent a lot of time in waiting rooms. Regular waiting rooms, ICU waiting rooms, post-op waiting rooms, post-reject waiting rooms. But after 5 months in Pittsburgh, and a very wonderful experience, Elizabeth actually ended up getting transplanted the weekend of Hurricane Andrew. And her surgeon turned out to be my best friends from home, medical school roommate, John Fung, small world. Elizabeth was successfully transplanted, and she was experimental doing FK506. And you know, it's extraordinary what happened post-transplant for her. She was president of TRIO Philadelphia, president of TRIO International. In fact, I think we were permanently president of some of these organizations. President of Suburban Music School, president of the Wallingford Swim Club, president of the Wallingford Arts Center. She's active today in hunger relief, in music, and in transplantation on a number of boards, as well as being involved with the Family Foundation, that gives about $5 million a year out to local charities. And so extraordinary. But most importantly, besides having to deal with me for the last 25 years, she's been the mother to 2 wonderful daughters, hard to believe. Back then, 4 years old and 4 months old. Today, that was at my older daughter's wedding. She's 29 and married. And my younger daughter is 26. We both live in Brooklyn, so that's what happens. I asked them for their thoughts, because it's interesting to see their perspective on mine. I have my thoughts, but so we were going to do a video, but one daughter was in Las Vegas on a business trip, and the other one was running around New York. So they sent me a small little write-up, so I'll read this. So I can read it.
This is to be read to the tune, It's a Wonderful World.
It was supposed to be It's a Wonderful World, but I couldn't get the technology to work, so I apologize.
Everybody can just hum that in the background.
No. So, Mom, Mommy, EPR, ME, those are all her initials. We would not be the women we are today without your love and continuous support. After you received your liver, when Beatrice was barely a person, I can remember she called in every hospital floor in Pittsburgh. I think it was the 8th or 9th floor. Those have been in Pittsburgh. God knows what the center is today. And Isabel was eating tuna fish sandwiches every day. You decided to live a life fiercely devoted to your children and your family and your community organizations such as TRIO. That became such a sort of a family for you. Before Beatrice could walk, he started to teach us the importance of giving back. From a young age, Jim Gleason is the ultimate giving back person. From a young age, we would travel to D.C., because at the time TRIO International was headquartered there, with you roaming the halls of the Smithsonian in awe of the history and science while you were at meetings, helping to make decisions that would impact the transplant community. We would go to the transplant games. My wife retired young, but she has something like 20 medals, mostly in swimming and race walking, by the way, with you in Salt Lake City and Atlanta, and here you doubt your abilities, and then watch you come away with the gold and silver medals in swimming and race walking. Your actions spoke louder than your self-doubt. In fact, every summer Elizabeth swims 2 miles a day. So you can imagine, it was a good liver she had. You've become a hero to so many people, and to us most of all. You were always there cheering us on as we tried and failed, at our athletic pursuits, dance performances, plays, clarinets, violin recitals, and concerts. You may have been late to pick us up sometimes, but you were always there as we felt your love and support, knowing you believed in us and gave us confidence to aim higher. Were it not for your donor, you might not have been here now. For the liver not only gave you life, it shaped you into the altruistic person you are today. You did very well in English, by the way. We hope that you never doubt that you have made a huge impact on the lives of so many in the transplant community and on our family. But watching you live generously, we have learned so much from you, how to be a good human being, and we can only hope to live up to your example. We wish we were able to join you today to celebrate your accomplishments at Trio, but we're so proud to call you Mom, and we love you so much. Love, Beatrice and Isabel. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jim. Oh, to listen. You okay? You have to speak. Okay, just the Jim.
The coding mic works.
Okay.
This is 35 years of hearing.
Well, I was not prepared, so I didn't write anything down. And I am not a public speaker, Howard, that's why I don't go out and talk to people. But I obviously believe wholeheartedly in the whole process of organ donation and transplantation. And I am obviously proving the success of the operation itself. And all the post-op stuff, because I did have a number of rejections. And one of the things I learned from all my rejections was that I have a very strong immune system. And that's probably another reason that I'm still healthy here today. But I obviously wouldn't be here and wouldn't be as healthy as I am without the help of my husband, Bruce, who spent endless days in the hospital while I was waiting. First, he was the one who pushed me to Pittsburgh because I was denying anything I felt. I really was not feeling well, but every day I would go swimming and I'd say, when I got out of the water after swimming 100 laps, oh, I feel so much better now. But the truth was I really didn't feel well and I couldn't eat and my body was deteriorating. He was the one who forced me to go to Pittsburgh, and he was the one who stuck by me, who took care of our children, and remember, he had a full-time corporate job before we went there. So this was his first experience, living day to day with 2 young children. And I remember one very, very strong memory. One day, he came in and he was like, ragtag, everything's falling off, and I was always saying, why does Isabel have holes in her shoes? Why is the stroller breaking down? But he held them together. They were healthy, everything was fine. But one day he came in, and he sat next to me in the bed, which he did most of the time, and he put his head on the bed next to me, and he said to me, have to get better. You have to get better. I can't do this. I can't do this alone. So, I guess that was part of it. That's part of what made me get better, but really, I wouldn't have been able to do it without you.
Okay, we're going to move from the present into the future. And Mary, if you want to hang on to this one, you're welcome to. The next time.
Got to get better.
Some pretty nice slides about the future hospital here. We so thank you for spending time with us and for your sharing earlier.
She has to get
so
better.
If you do hang up, good night. If you're still here when it's over, we'll say good night then. And with that, Steve?
People that you put out there tonight, and it's just heartwarming to realize what great strides have been made in the area of transplantation over the last 30 years. So thank you all. Thank you for the wonderful award, and I'm going to talk with you soon, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Steve, let me introduce the head of the project. Steve, take us to the view.
Good evening. I just want to start out by saying that it's a little bit humbling, or I feel a little bit boring working on buildings after listening to all of you folks talk about your experiences and the doctors and et cetera. But I've been in construction and buildings for about 35 years, and for 25 plus or minus of that was what I would call boring buildings, offices, hotels, etc. And I was brought here back in 2006, and I will just say that it's been a great honor for me to work on these projects, because although I'm not a doctor, and sometimes I get accused of that, to build the places that these doctors and the researchers and the clinicians, etc., work in is a great thing. So I'm going to try to quickly go through our new project, but I did in the motto of past, present, and future. This is the past for those of you who are familiar with Philadelphia, and quite literally that picture is about where we are right now. That was the convention hall back for many, many years. Lots of fairly famous things took place in that building, numerous conventions and championships, etc. And this is a very similar rendering of exactly the same direction and what that will look like in a couple years. So in the foreground is our patient pavilion. Penn Medicine has had a master plan for many, many years, long before I got here, and it's essentially made up of three things. It's education, it's research, and it's clinical care. And so since I've been here for about the past 10 or 15 years, and this building that we're all in has really been focused on expanding and enlarging that footprint, and specifically with ambulatory care. So that's the Perelman Center for Advanced Medicine. Translational research you see on the right, and Jim spoke about this a little bit earlier, but that's the building that we're in. It has clinicians, it has research, it has pretty much everything. And then the School of Medicine with the Jordan Medical Education Center opened a few years ago, and there's a fair amount of faculty offices that are necessary, and administrative offices to basically serve these roles. So those things have been taken care of over the past 10 years, and we've been looking towards a new inpatient facility. So, and again, going back past a little bit, this was a sketch that was made by the architect back in 2000. I think it was actually made a little bit before 2005, but this was a vision that the architect had after he learned about the master plan and the thinking of the leadership of Penn Medicine. And so what you'll see there is, right in the center is the Perelman Center for Advanced Medicine. On the right is a sort of a tower, in the back is a tower, and on the left is one. Now, much of that has actually come to fruition with this building. Penn Medicine, or the Perelman Center for Advanced Medicine, again, this opened in 2008 and is essentially an outpatient clinic. The next step, which I don't really have a shot of, is underneath us, which is the Roberts Proton Therapy Center. And then we moved to building the Smiler Translational Research Center, which is where we are right now, and in the background there is the south expansion, which houses the educational center and the faculty offices. So the next step is the pavilion, and this is a rendering again. So Perelman is on your right, and in front of you is the pavilion. It's a very large building, and so if you can imagine, if you would just take it and slice right through this building long-wise, this is what it will look like and just a couple of the major parts of the building down in the bottom left there. So this is going to be 1.5 million square feet, 500 patient rooms, and the top blue bands, there are 7 floors of patient rooms. So there'll be 500 total of that. 47 operating and procedure rooms. So the 3 floors right below the blue are going to be ORs. And I think Mike has his eye on at least a floor or 2 of that stuff. And then we will be wholly relocating the emergency department from where it is today into this new building. So that will have 61 rooms, and that is down in the lower right corner. It's kind of a blue, and it's on 2 levels, is the emergency. And below that is a parking garage. So this, somebody was talking to earlier, this building is being built on the previous site location of what was called Penn Tower. And Penn Tower had its own parking garage, so for all intents and purposes, we're replacing the parking in place, but building a much larger building. Just quickly, the overall timeline of the project, we started this, we actually started the selection process for the team back in the summer of 2014, started programming and concept design in early 2015. At the same time, we were building a temporary bridge, demolishing Penn Tower, and going through the design process. So the heavy dashed line there is today. We're about halfway through the overall project lifetime. And you'll see we'll be complete construction in early 21. I think Jim actually threw out 2020 a little bit earlier, but I can't be held to that. So, and then we're looking to put patients in this building sometime in 2021. One of the really important things that was part of the early planning of this was to have connectivity with the Hub campus. Obviously, its location is between Hub Hospital and the Perelman Center and everything that goes on here. So it will be the new hub of the Hub campus. So we have bridge connections to this building. We'll have bridge and tunnel connections to Hub. And another thing that we've done, and you can see in the bottom right, there's a bridge that will be across the road to the regional rail train station that services University City. And that's an attempt to help the community and help people push more for public transportation, but also get, it's a little bit of a safety thing too. For those of you who work around here or are around here, it's not always that safe walking, crossing streets, etc. There's lots of traffic. So, as well as keeping, although it's a massive building, 1.5 million square feet, the other focus has also been on keeping it to be a personal and sort of a ground-focused building. So this is a rendering of what it would be like, at ground level, and making and sort of having a connection from the outside to the inside, greenery, and a place where people can go if they need to go, and hopefully get a little bit of respite outside of the building. I meant to put one other slide in here, but one of the things that the team did very early on was we came up with guiding principles for the project. And there's 5 guiding principles, but I really want to talk about just 3 of them. This is a rendering of a patient room in the building. And again, there's going to be 500 of these. But there's a couple guiding principles that we've used throughout the process of design, and one of them is designing for the future, flexibility. And so this room is sized for any type of patient room. So there's a couple different levels of patient rooms that the Department of Health sort of has requirements about, and they're different sizes. They're larger if it's a critical care, and they can be smaller if it's not. What we decided to do at the very beginning of the job was say, All these 500 rooms are going to be exactly the same size. They're going to be same-handed, which means you walk in. If I walk into a patient room, I'm always walking in, and the patient is always going to be on my left. And there's always going to be a sink on my right, and that the bathroom is always going to be ahead of me on the right. There's lots of studies and things that have shown that this is increases patient safety, increases staff awareness, and so lots of things. So that was a decision that was made early on to say every room is going to be the same, and it can be, if 10 years down the road after we move in, we need more critical care rooms, we can easily make that transition almost overnight. We don't have to go in and do any kind of renovation projects. So another one was innovation and technology. And on the right is what we call the footwall. And I know for sure it's not going to look like that. This is a rendering that the designers have done. And actually a previous version was a little bit more spacey, but we know it's not going to look like that. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like because we're still only in 2018. We're moving in 2021, and we don't want to build a building that we move into in 2021 that looks like 2017. So we are working with clinicians, with our IT folks, with all kinds of third parties and outside vendors and things to look to the future and assure ourselves that what we put into these spaces is the best that we can at that time, but almost more importantly, is able to take and be prepared to adjust and react to the future. And so easily changeable. If we need to take that wall down and put up another one, I mean, we're doing a lot of things in a modular fashion so that we can react to the future. The last big thing about a patient room is actually the most important thing about a patient room is the patient and the patient's family and those folks that come to spend time with the patient. We started out, almost the first step up in the design process is to decide on what the patient room, how big it's going to be. So again, as I said, they're fairly large. There's the clinical space is as the clinicians and doctors walk in the door, but the family space is towards the outside wall, which kind of builds in a little bit of a separation and a way for that family to feel a little bit, they can feel separated from sort of the clinical side of life. And the other thing, and there's been a number of comments about waiting rooms. So this is a rendering of one of the waiting rooms on our patient floor. There'll be a number of these on each floor, and plenty of natural light. It will hopefully not be dingy, as I said, somebody referred to patient rooms earlier. We're striving to make sure that it is a comfortable feeling place and plenty of places for people to spend time. And the other thing that we were just talking earlier about this building, and it's very large. So a patient floor will have 72 beds. There's 72 rooms on every patient floor. From front to back of this building, or side to side, is about 2 football fields long. And we were talking about PT basically, patients needing to get up and walk. You know, why are you sitting there? Why aren't you up and walking around? And so I did actually, Mike, I did some quick checking while we were here. And if you make one lap around the floor, it will be about 20 feet short of a quarter mile. So I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to get that kind of thing built into the fact that you're in a patient building, you're on a patient floor, but you can really do something, and you're not going around in a circle 52 times to get what your doctor or nurse are telling you need to do. So it wasn't a goal, but it's a great outcome. And I think I'm sorry. And so finally, this is a view from sort of if you were going across South Street Bridge and looking back towards the campus of Huck and the Perlman Center. That's Franklin Field in the foreground. So it is going to be a large building and a presence, but we feel like it fits into the neighborhood fairly well for how large it is, and will serve a great purpose. I just want to say, I think Jim might say it, but we have a model of this straight across through the Perlman atrium on the other side on the bridge, and I'm happy to go over there and spend time, answer any questions, and we can look out onto the site. It's well lit, right, generally, so we get a good view.
Steve, thank you very much. Exciting trip into the future, and I got to tell you, it's amazing how much progress they make between our clinic visits on things out there. So if you get a chance, as we close the meeting, and I've got a couple of things to add first, you're going to go straight down this hallway. Don't go to the elevators, keep going straight, and you will then bear left and go out to the bridge, which will take you over the hospital. There's a glass enclosed bridge, and there's a mock-up of what this whole area looks like right there. And if you look out, you're looking at the steel structure and the first concrete floors of this multiple football field length building. And so talking about Steve presenting pictures and then being able to move out into yet another dimension of reality, that's what we're trying to do as we close this meeting. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming out and helping us celebrate the 30th anniversary of TRIO's founding. Thank you to our 30th Anniversary Awards Planning Committee. Jim and Lois Buller, stand up please. Where's Jim? Oh, he's behind the camera. I'm sorry, I forgot.
I'm working.
Sue and Bob Stelzner, stand up. Elizabeth, Susan, and my wife Pam and myself. And so thank you for planting the seeds for what we're doing tonight. Also, to our TRIO friend, Carolyn Jackson, the hospital's chief operating officer, who helped make this unique venue available. You don't get here as an outside organization. Okay? So our connection with Kim over here is what got us in here, and they have donated the space, which is normally charged internally. We had to pay for the overtime for the staff and support, but we saved considerable money through the generosity of Carolyn Jackson, and she's running this hospital from an operations standpoint. Every time I turned around, she got some detail about tonight that she was emailing me, taking care of. I don't know how she did that, but I just want to say thank you to her. The AV staff that's in the back room there, Bunny, I'm saying hi to you. He's making sure all this works. And Kim and Steve, of course, as we just heard Steve and Kim earlier made you welcome. So thank you very much for spending your Friday evening with us. And then finally, financially, 3 of our board of directors, Steve O'Connor out in California, Elizabeth, and myself, and my wife Pam, have made donations in excess of $1,000 to pay for this evening's event and making it possible. And so one final part, as Steve said, you're invited for this tour.